But we have Krystian here. He's criticizing the foundations of higher education systems and the foundations of these metric-based systems. We are trying to rank universities using numbers. We are trying to measure academic freedom using zeros and ones between these numbers. But Krystian trying to understand how we can change this world, and he's looking from the different perspective to the higher education system. As a higher education philosopher, not a researcher, he's a brilliant scholar, brilliant researcher, but I think he's perfect philosopher in his field. So it's my pleasure to invite him here and enjoy your meeting.
So thank you, Zehra, for a wonderful introduction. So after this introduction, probably there's no need for further introductions, but nonetheless, I will try to make one point. Like as Zehra said, I'm a philosopher by education, higher education researcher by profession. This is what they pay me for, and I'm a Marxist by heart. So this is how I think. But it altogether makes a very exotic position within the higher education research, within philosophy, and at the university in Poland, which is not very supportive to any of that, like not even philosophy. So, so my Marxist background is clearly depicted on the first slide, but I will try to do a very hard task with you. I would like to share with you some ideas, which is like not really easy in the format of a lecture or presentation. I would really love to invite you to a specific mode of thinking about how we can do higher education research a little bit differently to get away from a crisis that we are all experiencing in a different way, in a different geographical setting. But the question around which my lecture will be gravitating is on this first slide. So the question will be, how can Marxist higher education research help us regain the future in the age of uncertainty? So I simply try to refer to the title of our conference, and you can ask plenty of different questions to the assumptions that this one question is based on. Like, you can ask legitimately, is there a Marxist higher education research? Is it a thing? And I will try to convince you that there is something like this, and we can do it somehow. You will ask that if we are supposed to regain some future, have we lost it somehow? And I would try to convince you that there is a structural system that simply deprives us of possibility of thinking in the terms of having a meaningful contact with our future. And yeah, we will also ask about what are the features and structural features of the age of uncertainty, how it emerged, how it trapped us in an infinite contemporaneity, and so on. So I will start, but I will start with a note of gratitude. The gratitude and saying thank you for inviting me here, because no matter that I'm here in Turkey for the second time in my life, the Turkey is very important reference point for me, thanks to my dear friend and comrade Zehra, but also thanks to Nazim Hikmet, whom you probably know better than me. I know him only from Polish translations, but it happened to be a Polish citizen in 1951, and probably this one fact you may not know. But there is also another element that is important in Nazim Hikmet's biography. He was a graduate, one of the first graduates of a very specific institution that was established after the Bolshevik Revolution in Soviet Union, the Communist University of the Toilets of the East. And this is like a picture of the old building over there. And why it matters? Nazim Hikmet for me is a person that's come up with the greatest language of hope and the most powerful connection with the future and hope in a very hopeless situations and hopeless times. His poems for me are like simply constant source of inspiration. But I think that he became a communist poet not by an accident. And his experience of higher education done differently in Moscow in these early times of revolutionary process had some importance for his formation and the way how he established through his poems, through his imagination, the hopeful contact with the future. And for me, this is like very important. The very institution is that the Communist University of the Toilers of the East was an institution that was forming the leaders of different revolutionary and national liberation movements all around the globe back then. All before the Soviet Union was getting corrupted, more and more corrupted. So these were the days that were depicted in one of the Nazım Hikmet novels that I'm not sure what is its name in Turkish. I know it's a name in Polish, and in English it's like Romanticity. Like this is like a really nice novel that tells the story of these early days of education, but then also other stories of a comeback of Nazım Hikmet to Turkey. So this form of education was an higher education with a purpose. The purpose of liberation of the whole humanity from a capitalist and colonialist oppression. And his colleagues from these institutions were also quite meaningful, I would say, including Ho Chi Minh, Tan Malaka, Indonesian national liberatory activist, Liu Shaoqi, Ren Bishi, and others from Africa, others from Asia. That was a different sort of doing higher education. And I'm not saying that we have, in order to regain our future, we have to reestablish these forms of higher educating, not to say we have to reestablish the Soviet Union, but we have a lesson to learn from the way how higher education could be connected with the cause of the liberation of the humanity and with the cause of regaining the future. So that's the lesson Nazım Hikmet brought to me. But getting to the topic of our conference, the age of uncertainty, I will not bombard you with long slides, I hope not. But rather with pictures and images, pictures of white men, but with heart on the left side, at least two of them. So the very phrase, the age of uncertainty, symbolically appeared in first John Kenneth Galbraith's book and then a TV series on the topic on the BBC. So to understand how he framed the uncertainty he described is meaningful also to create a more historical genealogy that is important for us to understand our current predicament. So Galbraith was referring to uncertainty, referring to a period of gradually increasing crisis of a Western capitalist paradigm in the West, including the shift in economic perspective. The very show and the book was published in the 70s when world system was undergoing a severe crisis, world system and its central part in the West. Then in the 90s, in the early 2000s, Zygmunt Bauman was also referring to different structural features of the uncertainties we were starting to feel at the individual level, like at the level of our individualized being, where he was speaking simply of liquidization and liquid modernities, the liquidization of identities, the insecurities, precarization. But this was both Galbraith and Bauman's contributions to understanding the contours of the uncertainty were simply showing us how it began, the collapse of the slow, gradual collapse of the Western hegemony, and how it was experienced in the West. But at the same time, in parallel, Immanuel Wallerstein was referring to the same period that they both, that Galbraith and Bauman diagnosed like at the meso micro levels. He was diagnosing this age of uncertainty at the very macro level of a modern capitalist world system. He was saying about the beginning of a period of bifurcation, starting from the massive struggles and resistance in the different parts of the world that started in 1968. And I would say that while we can be a bit suspicious to all these macro narratives, but by Immanuel Wallerstein, one thing that he touched upon nicely is that something was happening, going on in the last 50 years or 60 years with the way how the world is ordered. And we are right now, as I think, entering in the moment, the final moment of this bifurcation transition. Like we are experiencing a world traversed by wars, traversed by ecological catastrophes, traversed by collapse of economic certainties, traversed by precarity, mass migration, and so on. But what Wallerstein's perspective offers us is to understand this as a moment that also could be framed as a period of hope, because nonetheless how Wallerstein is accused of providing a very rigid and stable theoretical framework that allows for a little level of agency, he said that the way how the bifurcation period will be enveloping depends on us, on our agency, on our collective agency. So either we can enter even a worse reality, and I think that we are on the threshold of doing of seeing this. Like if we look at the Israeli genocide, like that going on in Palestine, if we look at the wars like imposed by imperialist Russia, if we see the climate crisis, impacting us everywhere, we simply see that there is no, or literally very few collective responses to the structural nightmares that we are experiencing. But, and I will be exposing you to this nice graphics by Elle Lisitsky. She was really nice graphist that started her work in the early 20s, I would say, author of one of my favorite posters. I think that she touched in an abstract way the contradictory reality of decaying capitalism, I would say, and also brought some hope, but I will not be commenting on that anymore. So the age of uncertainty sinks into higher education we lived in. But I would say that what we have to take into account is that geopolitically, uncertainties and the age of uncertainties is not affecting us in an even way. I would say the Northern or Western higher education systems are simply starting to experience what structurally global peripheries, which or semi-peripheries experience for a long time. And the problem in the global peripheries is that what the Western scholars defines as uncertainties are slowly, gradually transforming into structural certainties in our context. I think of certainty of dependency, certainty of precarity, and all the nightmares that connect with that at the level of higher education. So if I say that the future of higher education was stolen somehow or disappeared, or that we no longer, no matter the efforts, the research efforts that are put into reconnection with the future, so the fact that the future, our connection with the future disappeared, is connected with slow, gradual capitalist transformation of our higher education systems, I would say. Like we are more and more included into capitalist reality. So higher education and universities are no longer and cannot be no longer, if they ever could be perceived as something laying outside of capital, but they are like more and more included within the circuits of capital accumulation and expanded reproduction. So this is one thing that connects, and this is something of importance for the way how I would like you to encourage to think that the problems of higher education system, no matter in what national systems, they are never detached from the general problems of a wider and broader economic and social economic setting. So if I would like to look for solutions to that problems, I will look into the solutions that offer some connection between these two spheres. So if we define the age of certainty as a multi-scale, multipolar crisis, our higher education research in itself, in its mainstream form, up for the challenge to help us sort this crisis somehow. And I would say that for many different reasons that were discussed in the mainstream higher education literature that simply focused on the history of development of higher education research as a knowledge practice to deliver the tools for state-driven or market-driven massification. For various reasons, higher education research is suffering in this respect, that it no longer can provide us the meaningful tools to sort this multi-scalar and complex crises. Nonetheless, that many people who work in higher education, including myself, are full of good motivations, and they really aim for sorting the problems. But I would say the problem with the field is not only its conservative character and descriptive research agendas, but it boils down to the issue of method and theory. I would say that's deep down in the way how we understand and frame the problems that we are facing within higher education. We are facing a wall that cannot be easily overcome with the main and dominant tools that we have at the disposal within this field. And when I say this, I simply think of a few theoretical contributions to the field and to the discussion, and that simply mark and draft the contours of the problems that we have. So I would refer to two branches of theories very shortly, only to simply have an example of a bigger problem that boils down to the level of ontological framing of the problem. So academic capitalism is a widely used term in higher education research, the mainstream one. It's nothing new, like starting from the crisis experience and named as the causes of the age of uncertainty from the early 90s, researchers, especially in the US, were researching the emergence of academic capitalism, which in the central context, in the US context, emerged in the context of severe, not that severe if we will compare that to the peripheral context, like for example, contexts that undergo the shock therapy in the 90s, whether they are like in Latin America or Central Eastern Europe. So higher education system in US started to get more and more underfunded, and in this context, a profit motive synced into the higher education reality. And the researchers like Sheila Slaughter, Gary Rhodes, Larry Leslie were simply trying to develop a frame that would allow them and others to understand the logic behind the academic capitalism, which as a result contributed, according to the scholars, to blurring the boundaries between the public and the private. And I would say this is one point that I would like you to keep in mind, that I would say that one of the problems of how we frame the problems within higher education is that higher education research in its mainstream liberal vision rely on the false dichotomy of the public and the private, which in many different geographical contexts and also in historical contexts is not something that could be easily operationalized to understand the complex higher education reality. But the bigger problem with academic capitalism theory was that no matter the good intentions of the authors and the whole school that emerged around Sheila Slaughter, like especially in the peripheral context, the academic capitalism theory started to be used rather as an implementation manual. Everybody everywhere wanted to have this shiny little academic capitalism that would allow the higher education system to operate in a more competitive, resource-efficient manner everywhere. But another response to the problems of how higher education is structured in the capitalist way came from a brilliant scholar, I would say one of the leaders, intellectual leaders and contributors to the higher education research, Simon Marginson, who with also a good motivation of defending what's specific in higher education, tried to develop a stance that no matter the motivation of the reformers, due to its specificity, higher education cannot be reduced to purely economic aspects. So he was hopeful and simply focused on other aspects that were not yet dismantled in the central and more peripheral context. That is the public mission, the common good mission of higher education. And he clearly emphasized that there is another logic behind the activities of the universities that's mainly because they are like status-oriented, and universities and academics are prestige seekers, mainly due to that, like capital cannot simply instrumentalize the field fully. And final point, he emphasized strongly that knowledge, in order to be productive, resists the privatization. So for this reason, and the destiny of this type of theoretical contribution is also a little bit sad, because I would say in conversation about how higher education could be reformed or should be reformed, these sorts of argumentation, like Marginson's, are used rather as a safety valve to soften the criticism and simply say, like, if higher education and science are somehow exceptional and resistant towards this capitalist pressure, like, we can sleep in peace, and in the end we will win. And I would say the higher education, in order to be defended and in order to regain the contact with the future and leave the age of uncertainty with our societies, need to wake up a bit and take a different stance. So going back to the question, like, if you accept, if you will trust me that there is something like a Marxist higher education research, and we'll see at the end whether I'm convincing enough, can Marxist higher education research help us regain the future and help us to simply come up with something that compensates for the limitations of the theories and the approaches that I designed? So I would say, if you want, there is a whole book on that. You can download it. We published that last year. This is a book on, I would say, I'm on a research-based contract and I have absolutely no teaching, so my standard form of communicating with others is through writing. So sorry for this. So if you want to have a philosophical argument on what I think we should do, it's by this link. But the proposal relies on like contrary or in dialogue with what Susan said. Like I propose you to think about the critic in a more integral way that is not only reduced to a negative diagnostic mode that simply deepens our despair. I would say in order to find another way of framing the critic, we have to get back to Marx, even if for some he may seem and his works a little bit too dusted. So I propose you to simply follow an argument of what integral critic as a research method for higher education research could compose of. And the first component, which is, I would say, the most featured tool that Marx has to offer to us, I would say, is the critique of political economy, which is what we know Marx for, the writing and developing a theory of value, labor theory of value, but generally understanding how capital, Marx was thinking about the industrial capital, of course, in the 19th century, but necessary moment of a critical work in higher education is to simply understand and reconstruct the flows of capital that sinks into higher education, how it established the relationships, what are the inner contradictions of this capitalist reality, how we can come up with the theories that simply can show the misery of the institutions in which we work. But the critic does not stop at this point, and it was never an intention of Marx to simply come up with an objectivist theory that simply describes the capitalist reality. He was defining his critic and critical approach to political economy in order to simply reinvigorate the struggles for the different reality, but the struggles also from which Marx was learning, I would say. And I would say that this is also an important aspect of any critical higher education research, to simply focus on the contradictions with the within the system, focus on the subjectivities that simply voices these contradictions, focus on the antagonisms, especially material antagonisms within the systems, and learn from protest dynamic. That is, as I learned like yesterday, even despite the fact that the protest activity is highly regulated in Turkey, the protests are ongoing on the smaller scale, voicing students' concern about the reality in which they are studying. So I would say in order to come up with the actual Marxist and critical method, we have to include this dynamics into our research settings. And the third component is going beyond, like thinking. This is the cornerstone of historical materialism as developed by Marx and Engels, to simply understand that historically capitalism and capitalist structuration of higher education is only transitionary phase. That it wasn't like that before, and we know that like in our higher education systems that in some of them, especially like for example in Polish higher education, it was capitalist orientation and structurization was not a thing like 20 years ago even. Nonetheless, higher education was operating within the newly formed capitalist economy. So this is also a component of a design that brings some specific hope that if things were not like this before, they also could have find an end depending on our needs, and also a tool that that helps us to contextualize that is embedded in Marxian understanding of reality, a mode of political ontology. I mean, this is like a philosophical aspect of critique that allows us to simply focus on different forms of being. That capitalism sinks into the way how we design, narrate, and philosophically frame the reality. And I would say the very conception of being as something atomistic and individual is a cornerstone of how capitalism as a system operates. It simply imposes this form of ontology. Political ontology is a reflection on other forms of beings, like, for example, the commons, that gives the very philosophical conception like different flavor. So I said that here you have a Robinson Crusoe, and I would say this is like a picture that's also tells maybe not 1,000 words, but at least 100. That's capitalist structurization of higher education is about turning us all into Robinsons of the universities. Like every researcher is slowly becoming an isolated, deserted island that is responsible for constructing its own tools, being deprived of any form of social relationships except of exploitation of some Fridays. So in order to resist, and so this is what Marx brilliantly has done in the opening introduction to Grundrisse, in order to resist this temptation, we have to simply understand that even Robinson in the classical literature and its use in classical political economy was always an artificially constructed figure, and we have to simply resist this sort of static conceptions of beings and essentialism that comes with individualism of Robinson's in order to simply think differently about higher education. I would say critique always starts from an ontological revelation that matches our experience, because we, in our daily activities, everything that has a meaning in higher education, whether it's educational setting or research practice, knowledge production practice, it's always already non-individual. The individual aspect of as we heard from the presentations today, like individualization that is imposed with a capitalist structuration of higher education is making us lonely, feeling toxic, desperate, competing with each other, and everything we strive for is based on different conception of being. So political ontology is a mode of reflecting on that, and it brings nothing new. We all feel that. In terms of critique of political economy, the moment in, like being within the capitalist higher education, this is like a super enormous body of work, I would say, and I would not like to stop at this point because I have much more hopeful points to make by the end of this presentation. And but anyway, I would say Marxist reflection is usually reduced to this dimension, like to criticizing the capitalist structures and structurization and capitalist economy. And I would say we could learn thinking on higher education from these forms of reflection, but this is not the place where we would like to stop. So this slide simply offers you 3 points on the content of 3 volumes of Capital. Probably nobody reads that anymore, and it's really hard to transfer to you, but Marx simply has written the Capital in order to depict the Capital as totality in its different moments. And I would say reconstructing such a totality, capitalist totality of higher education is one of the tasks of Marxist higher education in itself. So capital in itself is, as Marxists well know, is not a thing, but it's like a simply commodity-mediated social relationship. Capital is not a bunch of bag of money laying in the rector's office. It's like the social relationships in which we are embedded, in which we are forced to enter into labor, sell our labor power in order to satisfy our needs. And the more our daily reality is becoming mediated through different sorts of commodities, the less we have of an actual and real higher education experience. But what you probably remember, like volume 1 of Capital focuses on how capital is produced. And you may feel resistant towards this idea, and rightly so, that our institutions are mostly public. In very different national settings, they are public, and they are not turned into some sort of capitalist factories, and rectors is not a manager in a sausage factory, as Marx said, but nonetheless, especially globally in settings like Brazil, India, there is like a growing fraction of for-profit education that consumes students' lives, and this is also this is where even the Marxian schemes from Capital could be helpful to understand how this machine works and how it could be stopped. But there are like 2 other fractions that are more important for how I would like you to look at higher education, no matter whether it's public or private. There are like entities, especially as you see the true face of Elsevier over there on the picture, the entities that keep external position towards our universities. This is a shorthand on an argument, I would say, which is developed in my book on capital in higher education, and I can happily share it with you if you want. Our systems are slowly transforming into capitalistically structured higher education, no matter whether they are like state-driven or private, because of a growing importance of different apparatuses of measurement, I would say, starting from global rankings, national evaluation settings, local employee comparisons, through different sets of metrics that all boils down to a specific bunch of research outputs that are indexed in specific databases and journals that are owned by very few companies. And this is something that has a very transformative function for how our universities operates, no matter whether they are private or public. All the speeches given by. But I must admit that, and I have to say that today's opening by the rector was really hopeful. And if rectors in Turkey speak in this language of social responsibility of universities, this is a really hopeful country, I would say. It's not like that in the country where I'm from, where rectors are simply Elsevier slaves and focus on metrics and measurement and extraction of research outputs. But probably the rectors who speaks like this today can, in the other hand, extract the same labor from their employees. I don't know, but I will hope for the better. So this places a capital in an external position to higher education systems, but at the same time very impactful on how the things are reorganized. So I would say in Marxian terms, we can simply say that this is a beginning moment of a particular transition to something else, because measuring and abstracting is always a way how capital opens the way for different, larger, deeper transformations. So, but in order to continue on a more hopeful note, and I would really love to know what is the time. 10 minutes? 10 minutes? Okay, I will finish in 10 minutes. Yeah, sure, that's okay. Sorry. So there is another moment of critique, and I would say even more important, if we would like to get the hope. And the moments are interconnected, and they are rarely interconnected in Marxism. But in Marxism of my tradition, which is rather like liberatory, democratic, autonomous Marxism of Italian roots, I would say that's my main tradition. Not any sort of dogmatic and Stalinist heritage, rather democratic Marxism for aiming for the workers' control and workers' self-control and democratic control over economies and societies. So these two levels are rarely connected, but they have to be. And I would say, if critique of political economy maps the map of potential contradictions for social conflicts, there is another task that critical higher education scholar has to face. It is to take an antagonistic stance towards the reality, and also trace the contradictions which are exposed in the course of academic and student struggle. And I would say historically, academics, I don't know, in context that I know, but I know also that in Turkey it was a bit different, even recently in the context of Academies of Solidarity. Academics resist the oppressive regimes very rarely. Students do much more so, but in these days, less and less, as Susan has presented the case of Germany, where the politicization is no longer occurring in the university walls. It wasn't like that in the history. But anyway, like instead of developing a moral high ground from which critic can preach, the critic, which I mean, utilizes a method of co-research. So whenever there is a struggle, the obligation of a higher education scholar is to simply enter the struggle and learn from that. And this little picture is from occupation of a dormitory that happened in my city, in Poznań, that started in 2023 in December, like 2 years ago, and it opened it opened a cycle of students' mobilization and struggle around the issues that I know that are also familiar to students in Turkey. I mean the issues around the rising housing prices, rising costs of living caused by the inflation during the pandemic. You have your economic crisis here. We also had a massive wave of inflation in Poland. And students from anarcho-syndicalist trade union workers initiative, in Poland there is no Marxist organization nor communists, I would say, but anarchists, anarcho-syndicalists are at the forefront of social struggles for students' well-being. They decided to occupy the dorm that was decided to be privatized by the university. Nonetheless, that students are suffering the housing problems. And this occupation, which lasted for 10 days, changed a lot in public higher education in Poland. It's really started to voice the problems that students cannot, even if the education is publicly funded and free, formally free and tuition free in Poland, students, because of the costs of living, cannot work, cannot study, but have to work in a full time. And this is undermining the whole public mission of the university. But what is the core research with students? So this is like some sort of an intervention that's, and I would say that the much better language was developed for this sort of practice in the presentation, but by Susan and colleague during the session, like much more nuanced language for the experience of commoning and collectivity through the process of knowledge production or educating together. But I mean a little bit different praxis. That is like from the start oriented towards helping the struggling and protesting subjectivities to expand their capacities in their struggle. So together with the students, in the very process of the occupation, this is the dorm that they were occupying in Poznań, together with the students, we engaged in the process of common knowledge production. They were so enthusiastic about being together. That was the generation of students who socialized during the pandemic. They were super isolated, and for the first time in this political activity, occupying the dorm with 100 other colleagues, they experienced something new. They experienced for the first time that they can learn from each other, they can be together, they can create things together, they can be responsible for managing the low-scale and high-scale affairs of the university. They could be heard, they can enter into antagonism with faculty, with rectors, over the future of the dorm, and we simply decided to get the recollections and witness the testimonies of this event, and together we produced, in 3 months, we produced a research book on this experience, that then it was used by students for further mobilizations, and 3 other occupations of the dorms happened over the next 2 years. The union expanded, students started to be self-conscious and self-governed. So this is how I understand the antagonistic mode of researching higher education, researching for students to change the stuff. And there is this moment of the commons and beyond. I will refer to that experience back because it was already superbly covered by Susan in her lecture. And I would say that this experience of students of describing their experience of being together also resemble and designed the modes how they would like to organize the alternative setting of the university, the alternative to their capitalist isolation that they experience. In order to and I will finish. So if you would like to believe me that Marxist higher education research is something and could offer something, I would really insist on the integration of these 3 moments, like not only the critique of the capitalist transformations, not only the critique of the despair, but also revealing the different forms of being, but also reconnecting with the struggling subjectivities in higher education in order to simply establish the alternative setting for higher education. And right now, I would like to ask Zehra for reading the thing that gives me hope. I know this is a love letter to wife. I cannot pronounce it.
Sorry for my presentation. I'm not good at reading poems, but I love Nazım. En güzel deniz henüz gidilmemiş olandır. En güzel çocuk henüz büyümedi. En güzel günlerimiz henüz yaşamadıklarımız. Ve sana söylemek istediğim en güzel söz henüz söylememiş olduğum sözdür.
Yeah. So to have a last word, these days that we haven't lived are the best ones, and this is like how Nazım Hikmet, no matter that he was writing a love poem for wife, he established a meaningful way of simply reconnecting with the future. He, even in prison, even in the biggest despair, he was able to think of his days as better in the future. And we have to think about the better days for higher education in this very same way.